March 23, 1962, Los Angeles, the Polo Lounge, inside the Beverly Hills Hotel. That evening, the restaurant was packed. Hollywood stars, producers, directors, music industry power players, everyone was there. In a corner booth, Dean Martin sat, having dinner with friends, laughing, joking. Dean was one of the most beloved entertainers of the era. Genuine, talented, humble. But that evening, at another table, someone else was present, Victor Castellano, an arrogant singer. That year, he'd had a few hits and his head had gotten big. Victor loved hearing his own voice, loved drawing attention, and that evening, to draw attention, he chose Dean Martin as his target. Victor began speaking loudly. "Dean Martin? Ha! I don't understand how this guy got so famous. His voice is terrible. He stumbles around on stage like he's drunk." Several people in the restaurant turned, looked, felt uncomfortable, but Victor didn't stop. "He doesn't have half my talent, but he's lucky. He's famous because he's Sinatra's friend." Dean sat at his table, heard everything but didn't react, just smiled. That humble Dean smile, looked at his friends as if to say, "Forget it." But someone else was in the restaurant, in the back corner, sitting quietly, Louis Armstrong, and Louis heard everything, and Louis Armstrong didn't let disrespect like this slide. Before we dive into this powerful story of respect and friendship, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. What you're about to witness is one of the most dignified moments in music history, when Louis Armstrong defended a friend with nothing but truth and grace. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened that March evening at the Polo Lounge, we need to go back several months. We need to understand what Louis Armstrong was experiencing in the early 1960s. Because what Louis did that night wasn't impulsive. It was the culmination of a lifetime spent standing up for dignity, respect, and the people he cared about. November 10th, 1961, 5 months before that evening. Louis Armstrong sat in a New York doctor's office receiving news he didn't want to hear. His personal physician, Dr. Alexander Schiff, reviewed test results with Louis and Lucille. "Louis, your heart is showing significant strain. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. You need to drastically reduce your schedule." Louis had heard this before, multiple times, but hearing it again with more urgency hit differently. At 60 years old, Louis had been performing professionally for over 40 years. The pace had been relentless. Tours, recordings, television appearances, radio shows, movie roles. Louis Armstrong was everywhere, but the cost was adding up. His body was paying the price. Beyond physical health, Louis faced other pressures in the early 60s. The civil rights movement was intensifying. Younger black musicians and activists criticized Louis for not being militant enough, not using his platform aggressively enough, playing for segregated audiences without protest. These criticisms hurt Louis deeply because he'd fought racism his entire life, just differently. Through excellence, through being so undeniably talented that people had to respect him, through opening doors for other black musicians, but some young activists didn't see it that way. They saw Louis as too accommodating, too eager to please white audiences, an Uncle Tom who smiled instead of fought. Louis understood their frustration, shared their anger at injustice, but he believed in his approach, believed that showing excellence, demonstrating humanity, and treating everyone with dignity was its own form of protest, more effective in the long run than confrontation. Still, the constant criticism wore on him, made him question himself during vulnerable moments. December 3rd, 1961. Louis was performing at the Apollo Theater in Harlem when a group of young black students protested outside, carrying signs. "Armstrong sells out. Stop smiling, start fighting. Jazz should challenge, not comfort." Louis saw the signs as he arrived, felt each word like a physical blow. That night's performance was one of his finest, but afterward, alone in his dressing room, Louis cried. Lucille found him. "Baby, don't let them get to you. You've done more for our people through your music than most politicians do with their words." Louis looked at her. "But what if they're right? What if I should have done more, been louder?" Lucille took his hands. "Louis, you've lived with dignity your entire life. You've shown millions of people that a black man from the poorest neighborhood in New Orleans can become beloved worldwide through talent and character. That matters. That changes hearts. That's your way of fighting." Louis nodded, but doubt lingered. Throughout late 1961 and early 1962, Louis grappled with these questions. About his legacy, about his approach, about whether he'd done enough. January 15th, 1962. Louis received an invitation that lifted his spirits. Dean Martin was having a birthday celebration in Los Angeles, small gathering, close friends. Dean specifically wanted Louis there. Louis and Dean had known each other for years, mutual respect, mutual admiration, but more than that, genuine friendship. They'd worked together on television specials, recorded together, and discovered they shared similar values: humility, kindness, belief. Entertaining people was a noble calling. Dean never put on airs, never acted superior. Despite his massive fame, Dean remained grounded, treated everyone with respect, from headliners to stagehands. Louis appreciated that. Saw in Dean a kindred spirit. February 8th, 1962. Louis flew to Los Angeles for Dean's birthday party. The celebration was at Dean's home, about 30 guests. Frank Sinatra was there, Sammy Davis Jr., a few other close friends. No press, no cameras, just friends celebrating. That evening, Louis and Dean had a conversation that would make what happened at the Polo Lounge a month later even more significant. They sat on Dean's patio. Cigars, drinks, just talking. Dean mentioned the criticism he faced, people saying he wasn't a serious singer, that he was just a comedian who happened to carry a tune, that his laid-back style was lazy. "Pops," Dean said, using the nickname everyone called Louis. "How do you handle it, the criticism? People always trying to diminish what you do?" Louis thought for a moment. "Dean, people criticize what they don't understand. Your style looks effortless because you're so good at it. That's not laziness, that's mastery. Making something difficult look easy? That's the highest form of artistry." Dean appreciated those words. "Thanks, Pops. Sometimes I wonder if people see me as just Sinatra's funny sidekick, not a real artist." Louis shook his head firmly. "Anyone who thinks that is a fool. You're one of the finest singers of our generation. Your phrasing is impeccable. Your tone is beautiful, and your ability to connect with audiences is unmatched. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." That conversation created a bond, an understanding. Both men dealt with people who didn't fully appreciate their artistry. Both stayed humble despite success. Both believed in treating others with kindness. A month later, when Victor Castellano disrespected Dean Martin at the Polo Lounge, Louis remembered this conversation, remembered Dean's vulnerability, his self-doubt. And Louis knew he had to act. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we need to understand who Victor Castellano was. Victor Castellano was 28 years old in March 1962. He'd burst onto the music scene in 1960 with a song that hit number 3 on the charts, followed by 2 more modest hits in 1961. Victor had talent, a decent voice, good stage presence. But what stood out most wasn't his talent. It was his arrogance. Victor believed his own hype, thought 3 hit songs made him a legend, compared himself to Sinatra, to Elvis, to the greatest names in music. Music industry insiders knew Victor's type: young, successful too fast, ego inflated beyond ability. Most predicted Victor would burn out quickly, that his arrogance would alienate people, that without humility and continued hard work his career would fade. But in early 1962, Victor was still riding high, still getting bookings, still getting attention, and he loved attention, craved it, would do anything to be the center of focus, including, as it turned out, publicly mocking Dean Martin, March 23, 1962, the evening that would define Victor's future. Louis and Lucille were in Los Angeles for a television appearance. Decided to have dinner at the Polo Lounge. The Polo Lounge was legendary, part of the Beverly Hills Hotel, where deals were made, where stars dined, where being seen mattered almost as much as the food. Louis and Lucille arrived at 7:30. Were seated at a quiet corner table. Louis preferred corners, less attention, more privacy. They ordered, relaxed, enjoyed being together away from the constant touring schedule. Around 8:15, Dean Martin arrived with 3 friends. Dean saw Lewis, waved, came over to say hello. "Pops, didn't know you were in town." Louis stood. They embraced. "Dean, good to see you. You know Lucille." Dean greeted Lucille warmly. "How long you in L.A.?" Louis answered. "Just a few days, television thing." Dean smiled. "We should get together before you leave. Dinner, just us." Louis agreed. Dean returned to his table on the opposite side of the restaurant. Louis and Lucille continued their meal. Around 8:45, Victor Castellano arrived. With an entourage, 5 people. Loud, drawing attention. Victor loved making an entrance. They were seated at a prominent center table. Victor wanted to be seen, wanted people to notice him, wanted to remind everyone he was Victor Castellano, rising star. For about 15 minutes, Victor's table was just loud, laughing too hard, talking too loudly, drinking heavily. Typical Hollywood scene. Then Victor noticed Dean Martin, and Victor saw an opportunity to draw more attention, to establish himself as important by diminishing someone more established. Have you ever witnessed someone being disrespected in public and wished you'd stood up for them? What would you have done? Share in the comments. Victor started speaking, loudly, making sure his voice carried across the restaurant. "Is that Dean Martin over there?" His companions looked. "Yeah, that's him." Victor continued, voice getting louder. "Dean Martin, I don't get it. What's so special about him?" His friends looked uncomfortable. One said, "Victor, maybe lower your voice." Victor ignored him. "No, seriously, his voice is mediocre at best. He sings like he just rolled out of bed, no energy, no passion." Dean, at his table, heard. His friends heard. Others in the restaurant heard. Conversation started stopping. People turned. Dean didn't react. Kept his eyes on his plate. His companions looked angry on his behalf. But Dean remained calm. Victor wasn't done. "I've been in this business 2 years, and I've already accomplished more than Dean Martin accomplished in his first 10 years. You know why? Because I have real talent. Dean just got lucky. Lucky to know Sinatra. Lucky to be in the Rat Pack. Without those connections, nobody would care about him." The restaurant was now almost silent. Everyone listening, everyone uncomfortable. Victor's companions were mortified. One tried again. "Victor, stop. This isn't cool." Victor waved him off. "What? I'm just speaking truth. Dean Martin is overrated. He's a decent comedian, but a mediocre singer. His whole laid-back drunk guy act is tired. Nobody wants to see that anymore. We want real performers like me." Louis Armstrong in his corner had heard every word. Initially, he'd tried to ignore it. Young, arrogant people said stupid things. Usually best to let it go, but Victor kept going, kept disrespecting Dean. And Louis felt his jaw tighten, felt his hands grip his napkin, felt something inside him say, "Enough." Lucille noticed, saw Louis's expression change, put her hand on his. "Baby, don't. He's not worth it." Louis looked at her. "Dean's my friend. I can't sit here and listen to this." Lucille knew that look, knew nothing would stop Louis once he decided. She just squeezed his hand. "Then do what you have to do." Please subscribe if you want to see what happened next. Louis Armstrong's response will restore your faith in the power of dignity and true friendship. Louis set down his napkin, pushed back his chair, stood up. The movement caught attention. People noticed. Louis Armstrong is standing up. Where's he going? He looks upset. Louis walked slowly across the restaurant. Every eye followed him. The room went completely silent. Victor was still talking, oblivious. "I mean, if I had Dean's connections, I'd be 10 times more successful than—" He stopped mid-sentence, because Louis Armstrong was standing at his table. Louis didn't look angry, didn't look aggressive, just looked at Victor with an expression that was somehow more powerful than rage. Calm, steady, disappointed. Victor looked up, recognized Louis Armstrong, and for the first time that evening, Victor hesitated. "Mr. Armstrong, I didn't see you there?" Louis spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but in the silent restaurant, every word carried clearly. "Young man, I've been sitting over there listening to you for the past 10 minutes. Listening to you disrespect Dean Martin, and I want you to know something." Victor tried to smile, tried to play it off. "I was just joking around. You know how it is." Louis shook his head. "No, you weren't joking. You were trying to make yourself feel important by tearing down someone better than you. And that tells me everything I need to know about you." The words hit like physical blows. Victor's face went red. Louis continued. Dean Martin has more talent in his little finger than you have in your entire body. Dean Martin has spent 30 years perfecting his craft, treating people with respect, building a career on excellence and humility. What have you done? Had a few hit songs? That doesn't make you an artist. That makes you lucky. And luck runs out when you're arrogant, Victor tried to respond. I didn't mean... Louis raised a hand, not aggressively, just a gesture that said, I'm not finished. Let me tell you what real talent looks like. Real talent doesn't need to tear others down. Real talent lifts people up. Real talent stays humble because it knows how hard the craft is. Dean Martin is real talent. You're just noise. The restaurant was frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Victor's face was now white, all his arrogance gone. Louis looked around at Victor's companions. And you all, sitting here, letting him talk like that, you're just as bad. Real friends would have told him to stop, would have reminded him to be respectful. But you just sat here, laughed along, enabled him. Shame on all of you. Then Louis did something unexpected. He looked directly at Victor with something that wasn't anger. It was pity. You're young. You think success means you can say whatever you want. Treat people however you want. But let me tell you something, son. This business is small. People remember. They remember who was kind and who was cruel, who was humble and who was arrogant. And you just showed everyone in this restaurant exactly who you are. Louis paused. Let his words sink in. You want to know why Dean Martin is successful? It's not connections. It's not luck. It's because he's genuinely talented, genuinely kind, and genuinely respected. He doesn't need to tear others down to feel important. That's the difference between a real artist and someone who's just passing through. Victor sat there, speechless, humiliated, everyone in the restaurant watching. Judging him, Louis turned to walk away, then turned back. One final thought. And one more thing. I've been in this business for 40 years. I've seen hundreds of young talents come and go. The ones who last are the ones who treat people with respect, the ones who stay humble, the ones who remember that talent is a gift, not an excuse to be cruel. You remember that. If you want to have a career 20 years from now, you better learn that lesson. Louis walked back to his table. The entire restaurant watched. When he sat down, the silence continued for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Slowly. Then others joined. Within seconds, the entire Polo Lounge was applauding, not for entertainment, but for truth, for someone standing up for what's right. Dean Martin, at his table, had tears in his eyes and he mouthed, "Thank you," to Louis. Louis nodded, just a simple nod. That's what friends do. They stand up for each other. Victor Castellano sat at his table, face burning with shame. His companions wouldn't look at him. Everyone in the restaurant was looking at him, judging him, seeing him exactly as Louis had described, a young, arrogant kid who thought a few hit songs made him important. Victor wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to swallow him, but he couldn't move, could only sit there drowning in humiliation. After a few minutes, Victor's group quietly paid their bill and left. Victor didn't say goodbye to anyone, just walked out with his head down. He never returned to the Polo Lounge. The aftermath of that evening rippled through Hollywood. The story spread quickly. Everyone in the music and film industries heard about it within days. Did you hear what happened at the Polo Lounge? Louis Armstrong destroyed Victor Castellano. Victor tried to mock Dean Martin, and Pops shut him down completely. The story grew with each telling, but the core remained the same. Victor Castellano had publicly disrespected Dean Martin. Louis Armstrong had publicly defended him, with nothing but truth and dignity. Victor's career changed immediately. Radio stations that had been playing his music started dropping his songs, not officially because of the incident, but suddenly program directors remembered other artists they wanted to play. Booking agents who'd been scheduling Victor for appearances suddenly found those slots filled. Record executives who'd been interested in his next album suddenly went quiet. By June 1962, just 3 months after the Polo Lounge incident, Victor Castellano couldn't get arrested in the music business. Nobody wanted to work with him. Nobody wanted to be associated with him, because Louis Armstrong's words had revealed Victor's character. And character mattered in a business built on relationships. Victor tried apologizing, sent a letter to Dean Martin. Dean, gracious as always, accepted the apology, even called Victor to tell him, "Kid, we all make mistakes. Learn from this. Be better." But the damage was done. The industry had turned on Victor, and in entertainment, once the industry turns on you, it's nearly impossible to turn it back. By 1963, Victor Castellano had left Los Angeles, moved back to his hometown in New Jersey, took a job in his father's business. His music career was over, not because he lacked talent, but because he lacked character. And Louis Armstrong had exposed that truth. Meanwhile, the friendship between Louis Armstrong and Dean Martin deepened. In April 1962, a month after the Polo Lounge incident, Louis and Dean recorded a duet together. A song called Old Friends. It wasn't a commercial hit, but it meant something to both of them. The recording session was relaxed, joyful, two friends making music together. At one point, Dean stopped the session, looked at Louis. "Pops, I never got to properly thank you for what you did at the Polo Lounge." Louis waved it off. "Nothing to thank me for, just told the truth." Dean shook his head. "It was more than that. You stood up for me when I wasn't standing up for myself. You reminded me of my own worth when I was starting to doubt it. That matters, Pops. That matters more than you know." Louis smiled. "Dean, I've known you for years. You're one of the finest people I've ever met. Talented, kind, humble. Anyone who can't see that is blind, and I won't let blind people define reality." They continued recording. Their voices blended beautifully. Two masters of their craft, creating something special. That recording session produced one of Louis's favorite memories, not because of the music, though it was good, but because of the friendship, the connection, the knowledge that when it mattered, he'd stood up for someone he cared about. Over the following years, Louis and Dean remained close, appeared on television together, attended each other's important events, maintained a friendship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. In 1968, when Louis was hospitalized with heart problems, Dean was one of the first to visit. Brought flowers, sat with Louis for hours, just talking. "Pops, you scared me. Don't do that again." Louis laughed weakly. "I'm too stubborn to go anywhere yet." Dean smiled. "Good, because this world needs Louis Armstrong. I need Louis Armstrong." When Louis Armstrong passed away in July 1971, Dean Martin was devastated. He attended the funeral, delivered a brief eulogy. "Louis Armstrong was the kindest person I ever knew, the most talented, the most genuine. He stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. He defended his friends with nothing but truth and dignity. The world is darker without him, but we're all better for having known him." Dean's voice broke. He couldn't continue, just stood there, crying. The friendship between Louis Armstrong and Dean Martin, strengthened by that March night at the Polo Lounge, lasted until Louis's death. A friendship built on mutual respect, shared values, and the knowledge that true friends defend each other. The story of what happened at the Polo Lounge became legendary in music circles, a cautionary tale told to young artists about the importance of humility, about treating established artists with respect, about understanding that talent without character leads nowhere. Music professors used the story in classes. This is why character matters as much as talent. Victor Castellano had talent, but he lacked character. Louis Armstrong had both. That's why we still talk about Louis and nobody remembers Victor. The Polo Lounge incident also revealed something important about Louis Armstrong's character. Louis had faced decades of criticism, people telling him he was too accommodating, too eager to please, too nice. But that March evening, Louis showed that kindness and strength aren't opposites, that you can be gentle and powerful simultaneously, that the most devastating response to cruelty isn't more cruelty, it's truth delivered with dignity. Louis didn't yell at Victor, didn't threaten him, didn't use profanity or aggression. He simply told the truth, calmly, clearly, devastatingly, and that truth had more power than any aggressive confrontation could have had. In the years since, musicians and entertainers have referenced that evening. Frank Sinatra mentioned it in a 1970 interview. That's the Louis Armstrong people didn't always see. Kind, yes. Gentle, yes, but also strong. Also willing to stand up for what's right. The night he defended Dean at the Polo Lounge, that was Louis at his finest, not performing, just being himself. Today, over 60 years later, the Polo Lounge still exists, still hosts Hollywood's elite. And occasionally, when someone behaves badly, a server or manager will reference the night Louis Armstrong was there. Remember, Louis Armstrong once set someone straight in this very room with nothing but a few well-chosen words. That's the standard we maintain here: respect, dignity, character. The story serves as a reminder that success without character is empty, that talent without humility is fleeting, that how we treat others defines us more than any achievement. Victor Castellano learned that lesson too late. Spent the rest of his life knowing he could have had a career, could have been someone, but threw it away by disrespecting someone better than him. By 1995, Victor was living quietly in New Jersey, working, living an ordinary life, far from the spotlight he'd craved. A music journalist found him, asked about that March night at the Polo Lounge. Victor, now 61 years old, was reflective. "That night destroyed my career, but honestly, I deserved it. I was an arrogant kid who thought 3 hit songs made me important. Louis Armstrong taught me that importance isn't about hits or fame. It's about how you treat people. I learned that lesson, but I learned it too late." The journalist asked if Victor had regrets. Victor's answer was simple. "My only regret is that I didn't listen to Louis Armstrong that night. Really listen. He wasn't trying to destroy me. He was trying to teach me. But I was too proud to learn. By the time I was ready to listen, my career was over. That's on me. Nobody else." That interview revealed something important. Louis Armstrong's words at the Polo Lounge weren't just a defense of Dean Martin. They were an attempt to teach a young artist a crucial lesson about respect, about humility, about what really matters in a career and a life. Victor didn't hear it at the time, but eventually he understood. Louis Armstrong passed away in 1971. Dean Martin passed away in 1995. Victor Castellano passed away in 2008. 3 men connected by one evening at the Polo Lounge, one who defended dignity, one who received that defense, one who learned a lesson too late. The story remains, a powerful reminder of what matters. Not fame, not hits, not success by conventional measures, but character, integrity, treating others with respect, standing up for friends, using whatever platform you have to defend what's right. Louis Armstrong understood this his entire life. That March evening at the Polo Lounge was just one example, one moment in a lifetime of moments where Louis chose dignity over silence, kindness over cruelty, truth over comfort. That's Louis Armstrong's real legacy. Not the music, magnificent as it was, but the example of how to live, how to treat others, how to stand up for what's right, with strength and gentleness simultaneously. With truth and compassion combined, the lights still shine at the Polo Lounge, the tables are still full, the deals are still made, but occasionally someone remembers. That night, in March 1962, when Louis Armstrong stood up, walked across a restaurant, and reminded everyone what true greatness looks like, not in talent alone, but in character. Thank you, Louis Armstrong, for the music, for the friendship, for the example, for showing us that the greatest power isn't aggression, it's truth delivered with dignity. Forever.